This is the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. I'm sure you all remember the plane crash that was reported in Kozhikode in Kerala last year that claimed lives of 21 people. The plane crash was investigated and that report has finally come out. It's a report that's been submitted to the government. This report, viewers, is an example as to how laxity collectively by multiple departments, by a system, has actually led to the death of 21 people on that fateful night. Now, let me just jog your memory with the basics. It was an Air India flight that was coming from Dubai that tried to land on the Kozhikode airport, runway 28. It failed, so then the plane circled a number of times, approached from the seaside to land on runway 10, one of the tricky runways. By the time it hit the runway, it was a little too late. And then it did apply brakes, but the time wasn't enough. Now, this airport is a tabletop airport, which is why the plane overshot the runway and then fell into a gorge 110 feet deep, leading to these deaths. Now, I want to first take you through the key highlights. A lot of this then we will tell you in detail over the next 1 hour as we discuss this issue. But the key highlights of the investigation report that has been submitted, the first big one, which is reported by many, was the non-adherence of the systems and processes. Non-adherence of the process which has been laid down by the pilot didn't follow those rules. There was also a misplaced motivation of the pilot in command to land there. Effectively, the report talks about how the pilot in command, the only one in that airport, was also to fly another flight early next morning, which is why there was perhaps some misplaced motivation to land any which ways. The report also talks about pilot in command's overconfidence because of his very large experience, and that overconfidence perhaps leading to complacency. It then talks about other issues. This was the individual reading of the pilot and how he reacted, the pilot flying and the pilot in command. Then it talks about suboptimal performance of the windshield wiper. The windshield wiper wasn't working right up to the standard. In rain, this plane landed, remember that. It talks about poor crew resource management. It talks about lack of supervision in training, lack of supervision in safety practices. Non-standard practice of reporting snags. The report actually says how many of the snags, including this wiper which wasn't working properly, was being communicated verbally and not being written down or being made a proper record. The ADC officer changed the runway in use in a hurry in the last minute. The wind sensor that was installed there was not as per the laid down criteria. That department officer that is supposed to be in the ADC tower was not present at the time of the accident. This and a lot more are the findings of this report. So essentially, right from the airline to the civil aviation regulatory body, to the staff present at the airport, to the airport authorities, and of course the flying crew, the weather department, all of these collectively would have had to fail for this disaster to occur and for 21 lives to be lost. I want to take this example and talk about security and safety issues when it comes to flying in our country. This chalta hai attitude that we have, to just ignore a few small little things because we think they're small little things. Do we really have to do the checks on pilots every time they fly to see whether they've consumed alcohol, whether there's alcohol in their blood? Do we really have to put down in writing every single snag which is there? Can we, instead of ordering a fresh one, just use the existing piece from somewhere else and put it in? Can we just try one more time to land on this runway and see if it can be done? Do we really need 5 pilots in command to be functioning there? Can we just make do with 2? Just make them fly a little extra. This chalta hai attitude is the biggest danger to our air safety today. This laxity is the biggest danger to our air safety today. Make no mistake, when it comes to flying, the DGCA, the aviation regulator, has the toughest of the rules on paper. If they begin to implement it, there are high standards to be met. But the problem is, do we do that? 10 years before this crash, a similar crash took place. Did we learn from our mistakes? Did we put into places those systems, checks and balances? That's the big question. Let's say good evening to Air Commodore B.S. Sivach, joining me this evening, Director General for Aviation Safety Management for Society of India, Wing Commander Praful Bakshi, the Aircraft Accident Investigator, Captain Minu Wadia, Founder President for Federation of Indian Pilots, Captain Amit Singh, Founder for Safety Matters Foundation, an NGO on safety, Sanat Kaul, former Aviation Secretary, International Foundation for Aviation, Aerospace and Drones, also joining me this evening. Thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. Let me actually start with Wing Commander Bakshi. Wing Commander Bakshi, you were part of the investigation team. To your mind, which was the most concerning aspect that you found?
Thank you, Tanvi. Very nice to have me on your program. I had gone and done independent investigation for the Mangaluru air crash 10 years before this. And you will be surprised, I stayed there for 3 days. We checked up everything about the way, because I was an accident investigator also when I was in service. I had a number of meetings with the DGCA and some recommendations I had given independently at number of times, which from the angle of flight safety only. The question is, when these recommendations which I had given, they turned out to be the same recommendation which were official investigation body found out, and 40 of those recommendations were suggested. And mind you, when the Kozhikode accident took place, probably none of them or a very few of them must have been attended to. I have not gone to the record of how many did they look into. But the question is, we'll find out and we'll tell you a lot of things. The command pilot, we made an error. Here we are not going to tell you what happened. That is different. Everybody knows what happened. There is in 286-page report what happened. Question is, we had made number of recommendations to improve the flight safety aspects. The DGCA has very big rules. Who implements that? I had suggested in a seminar with the DGCA that Aviation Safety Inspection Board, independent board, must be established in India to inspect all the workings which the DGCA has ordered. They could go to all the airlines, check up their maintenance, check up their training. In fact, they can do the surprise inspection. They should do it. This must come as a parliamentary act, because every airline will fight tooth and nail not to allow it to happen. But the question is, they won. Nothing could be done because the airlines pressurize their pilots. They say, if you go around, you will have to answer because we have to spend more fuel. The pilots are reluctant to go around. Imagine in Air Force when we were flying, you can ask Air Commodore Sivach, if you are not sure, go round, was the first order. Here, the people are asked. Then the person is on a flight routine next day. He cannot leave the place. He has to land, and he is trying to land. Well, of course, we went and checked up on the Mangaluru air crash. What all happened? How did he go overboard? Where did the left tire burst? How did he skid? But that's a different thing. Question is, why the implementation is not being done? If in our program we don't address it, we will only be doing disservice to the aviation. Why the reluctance in the aviation body? Why the DGC is reluctant? And does DGC have professionals posted out there? I was on one of the important programs, and DGCH chairman was there, and the director general, DGCH. I asked him a question: how are you qualified to hold this post? Are you an aviation expert in any field? No, I'm a bureaucrat. This is the answer. I said, you're the last person to be out here. And this is what I said in one of your televisions.
Right.
I am telling you, madam, this services to the aviation we are doing. We can spell out any number of causes for the pilots and all. We can blame the pilot. Pilot was at fault. Okay, that's a different thing. But the question is, why are we shy of implementing? Why are the shortcomings in implementing? And how can we improve the working of aviation? That is a major thing. There are a number of aviation.
Yes, because Vingabanda Bakshi, you very rightly pointed out, we can blame the pilot, and maybe there were certain decisions taken, procedures followed, not followed, that must be spoken of. But there is a larger problem here, and that's exactly what I want to focus on right now. For example, yes, the report does say that the pilot ignored protocols of mandatory landing calculations that were omitted, no risk assessment made by the pilot, final landing made during active rain, did not brief the co-pilot about the landing conditions, and finally ignored the warnings by the co-pilot or the pilot who was monitoring the PM to go around. That order was given, and still the pilot flying went ahead and attempted to land the plane. There is also much that has been said, Air Commodore Sivach, about the pilot being on some unprescribed anti-diabetic drugs which could have hampered his reaction time and decision making. And all of that is fine, and if that's what the investigation showed, you can record that. But I have a bigger concern when you say that the pilot's windshield wiper wasn't working, that the central line lights that were supposed to be installed on the runway were not done, that the runway was supposed to have certain systems in place that were told by the DGCA several years ago, and 5 years later also that had not been done. And those are the issues that we can also look at fixing. Air Commodore Sivach.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to compliment the chairman of the Accident Investigation Committee, Captain Surinder Singh Chahar, and his team members for having a very, very professional task of the investigation report. And they submitted the record in, I think, in a record time of less than 1 year, which is really unheard of. We haven't come across this kind of, professionalism, and the less time taken for preparing and submitting the report, and it has been very exhaustive, very, very, informative, and it has addressed all the shortcomings, all the contributing factors, where pilots went wrong, where ATC went wrong, where metric went wrong, and where other agencies also went wrong. So for that, justice has been done for this investigation report, very well done indeed. And Tanvi, you being from non-aviation profession background, you have done a good job of summarizing various points. So I'll not like to go into various details that are available on the accident investigation report. And what is most important is that we do not learn lessons from past occurrences. If you recall, in 2010, Mangalore accident, same airline, same type of aircraft, and same type of runway with stable top. Only difference was here in Kozhikode, it was raining and bad weather, and there it was not bad weather. That was the only difference, otherwise exactly same. The aircraft floated for a long time in both cases. Aircraft touched down almost after covering half of the distance of the runway. In fact, in Mangalore, it has covered more than half of the runway. And the various recommendations were made for that by that investigation committee. And I don't know how many of these have been implemented. Our implementation of the recommendation of various court of inquiries has been found to be badly lacking. And another important thing I'd like to talk about is there's a quote that the value of safety is known only during its absence. So till the time safety is present, no accident incidents. Most of the operators are busy generating revenue, completing flight, completing mission, completing task, and safety is given a low priority. Safety is taken for granted, safety is ignored, safety is neglected, and safety does not get the place of pride and importance in that organization. And when the accident happens, when the safety leaves after having been treated so in such a shabby manner, one finds a safety decide to leave. And in this case, it took the safety to leave almost 10 years, 2010, 2020. Exactly same accident, we didn't learn lessons from that. Now, after the accident takes place, now suddenly the value of safety comes up. Every TV channel, every expert, every professional, everyone else around the world and all the other professionals are talking about safety, safety. We should have done this, we should have done that. These recommendations should have been implemented. But that's only after we have lost an aircraft, we have lost number of crew members, passengers, and caused devastation. So that is too late to value the safety. Safety must be valued and prioritized when safety is present. But unfortunately, when the safety is present, nobody seems to care about the safety. Now, everyone knows about this, that bad weather conditions which prevailed at Kozhikode, where there's so much, it was thick of monsoons, mind you, August, 7th August, mid-monsoon,
Right.
very adverse weather conditions, rain, cumulonimbus clouds, and tailwinds, and wet, contaminated runway. Now, such conditions coupled with night is a dangerous combination. And during this time, everybody has to be on their toes. Everybody has to be fully situationally aware. And there should be full support also of the pilots from the ATC, Met officers in reporting correct visibility, correct wind conditions, runway conditions, cloud conditions, etc. But when you have so many failures on all fronts, you have the report clearly brings out all the deficiencies which were found. Can you imagine that during this adverse landing, the tower Met officer is not present, and the ATC officer is just 29 years old, just has 3 years of experience in air traffic control.
Yes.
What kind of help, other than doing the routine duties of a ATC clear to land, clear to take off, and provide weather conditions? Then our weather reporting also is very, very poor standards. The measurement of the winds, the runway contamination, etc., is very, very, in fact, below standard, below acceptable standard. The Met and ATC had to be fully involved to provide all kind of support under such conditions. And even the management of the airline also should be alert and vigilant on such occasions.
So, Air Commodore Sivachin, some of the points that you've raised, and I'm sorry I'm coming in here, are actually very relevant to even what was found in this report. For example, the weather duty officer wasn't present in the ATC at the time of the accident. For example, even several of the airline staff members were remotely functioning, maybe due to pandemic times or whatever reasons, but them being there on ground, the report says, would have also made a difference. But there is a larger point that you made, and I want to bring in Captain Meenu Wadia on that. Captain Wadia, the larger point is, why doesn't the regulator ensure that the rules are implemented and followed all the time? Why does it only become an issue when something goes wrong and you are actually risking this to happen every single day?
I'll clarify this very simply and very clearly for everyone. But before I do so, let me repeat 1,000,000 times what Wing Commander Bakshi just said, that there is no independent safety board, which is prevalent in all countries in the world, except India. And it is not his view or my view. A safety committee appointed by the government has recommended there should be an independent safety board. It does not exist. Now, let me start by quoting the ICAO annexure, which deals with accidents, annexure 13. The preamble states very clearly the aim of an investigation is to prevent a recurrence and not to apportion blame. Today, yes, you can point fingers at this captain who made many mistakes, and certainly he made many mistakes. There's no argument about that. But would you like to just keep on pointing fingers at him and keep on letting the accidents keep on happening again and again? This is happening because we do not follow the principles of aviation safety laid down by ICAO. Now, I have even represented ICAO in India for certain issues, and I've been fighting for the last 30 years with written to the Prime Minister, Minister of Civil Aviation, mainly, first thing, to have an independent safety board, which you were asking, why is it not done? It's not because of callousness or casualness. It is purely because of self-interest. The DGCA and the bureaucrats do not wish to be accountable for all the accidents which have been actually happening. For your information, I'll just tell you, even the Chakri-Dadri mid-air collision that had taken place about 30 years back over Delhi, we had forecasted that accident in writing, informed the government this would happen. No action was taken. Can you tell me any accident investigation that has taken place and has blamed the DGCA or the airport authority? It is always the pilots to blame, or someone, some engineer to blame, or someone in the airline to blame. If you follow the system, and what are the systems today? The most important thing is the investigation of not the accidents, but the incidents. If all the incidents that take place, and there is if I go to a lot of procedures, I'll be wasting a lot of time of the people concerned. But let me make it clear that many of these regulations are put down in writing. There are procedures laid down how an investigation for incidents has to be taken and done. And if they're recorded and action is taken properly, you will avoid these accidents from taking place. 80% or 90% of the accidents will not happen if the safety procedures are followed strictly. And you're very right, the DGCA has only bureaucrats. And if they today have pilots and aviators, it is not of their own volition. The ICAO has mandated, the FAA has mandated, they've come and laid down standards for India. And that is why even today, you have some semblance of aviation safety inspectors who are aviators. Otherwise, the whole office of the DGCA, just for your information, I may have spent my whole life towards aviation safety and standards, but I am not qualified to be at the DGCA of India. Wing Commander Bakshi, who's articulate in aviation safety, is not qualified to become the DGCA of India. Why? Because please find out the government rules who's eligible to become the DGCA first of all. So the bureaucrats have, for the last centuries, for the last decades, have taken us for a ride.
Right.
Accidents have happened continuously, and they'll continue to happen unless you resolve this issue.
So, okay, now, to the point that you made, for example, yes, even in this case, the report itself talks about the fact that the pilot was perhaps, there was some, misdirected motivation to land there because he was also supposed to fly out, take another flight the next morning. The only pilot in command, commanding officer with 26 other officers, imagine the amount of burden and number of times he would be put on roster to fly. Now, those are not things that should be acceptable. That cannot obviously be considered as a safe system to continue functioning. Why does that happen? Mr. Sanath Kaul, good evening to you. Thank you for patiently waiting. Every conversation that we've had about air safety always boils down to many experts telling me, well, DGCA doesn't implement the rules properly.
Well, you're right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. So I will say a few things. One, that about 10, 12 years back, when I was in the ministry, we had a DGCA who was a professional from the DGCA cadre. We always had one. This has shifted over time, and I am saying that people who are not really qualified, they don't have the domain experience, have started becoming DGCAs. Now, this is You can blame bureaucrats, you can blame politicians, you can blame anybody. But this is happening, and it is happening. Okay. Beyond that, it was decided that there should be an independent DGCA at some stage. International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, was asked to prepare to give an officer, they gave a consultancy to an officer who was an officer of a German officer who was part of ICAO, retired. He was asked to make a report for creating a authority, meaning an independent civil aviation authority, which will be financially independent. It will not have to sort of take the dictates of the ministry. This report was prepared, and it was decided not to implement the report. So these are certain very serious issues which are happening. Now, who is to blame? I don't know. So these are then, for example, controllers. Now take controllers of aviation are recruited by airport authority. They are given job by airport authority. And this has been objected to by ICAO, that how are you doing all this? You must have some independent person to assess it. That is also not happening. So there are certain serious issues as far as the wider picture is concerned. And then DGCA is underfunded at times. There was serious issues with ICAO safety audit, as well as with FAA. Now, FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority of US, downgraded India.
Yes.
From to category 2. After that, a meeting took place at the level of Prime Minister, and a huge number of posts were created, given, and things improved. And then FAA finally lifted India back to the original position. But this happens often, and the second thing is that the Indian civil aviation sector has seen such massive growth over time, except for the unfortunate COVID situation. It was growing at double digits. And there was no follow-up at the level of DGCA to create the number of posts, to create the number of inspections. There was nothing. They were not able to manage the whole thing, which is required to create a proper regulatory framework for civil aviation. So these are very serious issues, and I don't think much has been done even now. In a way, today we are having COVID, and therefore the flights are down. But once it picks up, again we'll have the same problem. So these are problems which are sort of endemic to the government. They don't want an independent DGCA. They don't want to create posts. They don't want the financial independence of DGCA. So then that is that. Even at the airport authority, you have something which even ICAO had rejected. So where do we go? I don't know. That's what I can just bring the things to the table.
Mr. Kaul, I appreciate what you're saying, but air safety is of such utmost importance. It's also a field where, for anybody to be able to fly a plane, make a plane, check a plane, you have to have been highly trained and skilled. It is also an industry in our country where we have so much of expertise, so much of experience, so many of our veterans from the forces who do become part of the aviation industry, who've literally lived all their lives following these rules and protocols and systems with discipline. And all you have to do is just transfer it and transmit it and ensure that it continues even in the civil aviation industry. But for some reason, that doesn't take place. Captain Amit Singh, where do we falter? Did we really significantly on ground improve things to get our ratings back from FAA after it got downgraded, or was it just lobbying?
Well, you rightly started out the program by saying chalta hai attitude. That literally translates to the safety culture. Now, the broad picture is we have a national culture, then we have organizational culture and personal culture. So that is how safety functions. We have to create a generative safety culture wherein everybody feels responsible for safety of themselves and others. It is not a police and a thief game that we have to catch you and punish you. Everybody should be a participant and stakeholder. Right now, there is literally a breakdown of trust between the regulator and the stakeholders, be it pilots or the operators. So everybody believes in the lowest level of safety, which is pathological safety, wherein people say that do not report anything until you are caught, or do not voluntarily report. So that is the level of safety which is the nadir. To reach the zenith, you have to build trust. And how does trust create? When you collaborate? Collaborative decision making. You cannot make rules and regulations sitting in ivory towers, or in, like, investigations are done, closed door investigations, like this Kozhikode accident. It has to be an open investigation wherein experts of different domains can participate and contribute, so that the report which comes out is meaningful. This report is quite comprehensive and has touched a lot of areas, but is unable to conclude properly. Thus, the probable cause which is listed, I totally disagree with it. The cause which is stated in the report is the pilot did not follow SOP. Now, if you do a root cause analysis properly, then you have to go deeper into it. Why did the pilot not follow SOP? So those are the things which have not been done. You cannot, pilot did not follow the SOP is just a symptom. It is not the root cause. The problem is the culture prevalent in the aviation today. So the regulator does not have effective oversight. They may have oversight, but it is not effective. There is a video which is being circulated of an Air India aircraft landing at Port Blair, middle of the runway. And that was in 2019. Nothing was done about it. Had the runway been wet, or reduced braking action, or any other thing, the aircraft would have gone off the runway. Similarly, in 2019, in Kozhikode, one Etihad Airways 320 went off the runway on the side and came back. So managed to stop. It was not investigated by AIB. The investigation was handed over to the Gulf investigators, UAE. And it is not even available on the website of AIB. So are we really interested in investigating and learning from it? We don't have to go far. There is one report published by Air Marshal J.K. Seth. If you dig that report out and read, it is a very comprehensive and the only report available. The function of it was published, but it was never implemented or released for various reasons. And amongst other reasons, it points out the investigation and learning from investigations rather than using investigations for punishing people. If you start punishing, people will start hiding facts, be it engineers, ATC officers, or the pilots. Now, 2019, again, 40 pilots were suspended. Even now, anything happens, you suspend people for 3 months, 6 months, even 3 years. There is this Trichy report which came out in Feb, Air India Express Trichy accident. It took 33 months for it to release, and that too, it has not come up with a root cause. So what is the purpose of investigation? I have investigated on my own, re-investigated accidents, especially the Ghatkopar accident, wherein the King Air crashed in the suburb in Mumbai. If you read the report, it points out towards DG. The operator did not have a chief of safety. How did an operator get a permit to operate without a chief of safety? I filed the RTI. I got an answer that the recommendations are just passed on to the stakeholder. So there is no follow-up. There may be plenty of recommendations. So what is the follow-up? So that is the chalta hai attitude or the safety culture currently prevailing.
Because,
so the
because
whole system has to be
bureaucrats
shaken
perhaps
up,
sitting.
especially when you look at
Yes.
the monitoring, the flight standards and training division. So how do we train pilots? So before the pilot touches a machine, the pilot is trained. So what is the standard of the trainer and the level of competency of the trainer? Now there is a news that before the sale of Air India, a number of pilots are being upgraded as the wholesale. So who monitors the standards? Air India people become examiners on seniority. So there is no reliability of the ratings is something called inter-rater reliability, wherein you cannot have an examiner who is too lenient or too strict. You have to follow some norms. So these training standards have to be basically tightened, and surveillance has to be carried out. In this report, the airport operator has been completely absolved. The operator at Kozhikode, the installations and infrastructure are below standards. So if the risk level increases, you have to have more buffers rather than giving exemptions on safety. So that goes against the norms of safety. Why is there even a debate on safety? When there is a situation where the airport is earning revenues, airport is supposed to spend money on stations, so safety is enhanced, whereas it is mandated. We don't have center line lights, whereas it is mandated. We don't have RESA. We only have overshoot RESA. The undershoot RESA is not there. The
Okay.
report has cooked up the undershoot RESA. It is not notified in any of the minima. The report has said the Air India Express has filed a low visibility minima. So who has oversight of the system? Who really knows in which direction aviation safety is headed? The regulator surely doesn't know, because they
Well,
don't
it's
have
very scary to know
adequate
this,
feedback on
that
data.
the regulator surely doesn't know, and then there's a big question mark on who really has oversight on the system. And for a citizen, it's extremely scary to know that that is the reality. When there was a conversation like Mr. Sanat Kaul was pointing out, to spin it off and make it an independent authority, why could that not be done, Captain Meenu Wadia? Would that not have been a good idea, or is it that the government needs to have some control on the aviation regulator?
It is not my views or your views that matter. Safety, in fact, Captain Singh just pointed out the committee headed by Air Marshal Seth, and the members of that committee were the highest people in India. The Director General of Civil Aviation himself, the Chairman Airport Authority, and the Chairman and Managing Director of Indian Airlines. They have given this report, and he rightly pointed out that report is in the dustbin. Now, is that acceptable to you? And everyone made a very general remark. I'll get into specifics. Today, all over the world, there are standards which are maintained, and there are less accidents taking place abroad than in India. And why is that so? The world accident rate, the average is 1.5 hull losses per million departures in the world. There are advanced countries which are monitoring the air safety, that is America, Japan, Europe, etc. Their safety record is 0.5 to 0.6 accidents per million departures. Now, India had a very high, and I do not want to specify and give you numbers and scare you people, but I have been working on aviation safety for more than 40 years. However much you try with the ministers, with the Prime Minister, when it does not suit the bureaucrats, they will not implement it. Just to give you a further first-hand example, is I personally was selected by the UPSC to head the aviation safety in the DGCA, to be the chief inspector of DGCA. The DGCA himself cancelled the appointment for the interview. Why? Because Captain Wadia was too strong a person for them to handle. They did not want a person who is strong and knowledgeable. They want to be reliable. They want people to say yes sir, no sir, three backsfulls. You have to address the system itself. And the only person who can do it right from the top is the Prime Minister himself with the help of the Civil Aviation Minister. You don't require a widespread thing like aviation culture. It will all come automatically if the system was put into place today. And the systems are existing all over the world. Why shouldn't it be not existing in India too?
Because of the chalta hai mindset, it just unfortunately boils down to that, and those sitting in offices with the decision-making powers don't perhaps understand the dangers and the challenges of air safety. Wing Commander Bakshi, you wanted to make a point?
I just want to first thing really thank Captain Wadia for bringing out this so clearly. I mean, the question arises out here, the reluctance to do. You know, in Air Force, whenever there's an accident, there is a court of inquiry. There's an independent court of inquiry and an accident investigation board, which is independent of the court of inquiry. I remember going in the AIB, doing an accident investigation on a trainer aircraft, which could not perform force landing properly. And I submitted in my report that how did this aircraft get selected for training? Can you beat it? I was under the pressure. And people did not like telling, and it started telling me, no, don't put it up. Don't put this point up. I said, nothing doing. This will go to air headquarters. Let's come to know how this aircraft did come online. Who selected this? Question is, somebody has to bell the cap. There was one fancy letter came by a bureaucrat that why the bureaucrats should be heading the aviation bodies. You know what is the reason? His main reason was they can handle the press conferences very well. I said, any captain, he can speak English very well, and press does not respect fancy English. They respect the knowledge. So please don't even think of this. You know, we have this problem like this. And the Chakri Dadri crash, which was there, in that we had clearly brought out two blips in line, descending towards one climbing but descending 300 meters apart. It was calling for a disaster. The question is, people know it, controllers know it, but they said, nobody told us to do it. Imagine a small thing like this because proper supervision is not there. There has to be professional supervision. And as I brought out in my opening remark, the independent accident investigation must actually look into the whole thing. This has to be done, and recruitment of the entire aviation body should not be left to the airlines, that they will recruit their own maintenance people, etc. Let it be a centralized body. Let the airline also cooperate. Let the Air Force do it. Pilots, engineers, ground safety, maintenance team. This should be on national level. It is a national problem, not an individual airline problem. That's what we should do.
Okay, I had one other aspect that I wanted to raise, which is about what is it that India doesn't do properly, which internationally, other countries would strongly follow. But before that, yes, Air Commodore Sivach wanted to make a point.
Tanvi, you were talking, Captain Amit talked about organization culture, the individual culture, the company culture, and the national culture. Now, you rightly brought out that our national culture is chalta hai attitude, the lack of sense of responsibility, accountability, involvement, and generally casual attitude. Now, I'll bring out some very important points into this culture aspect. Now, in India, if you have unstabilized approach by 1,000 feet in IMC condition and 500 feet in VMC conditions, you are supposed to go around. No question asked. And DGCA has made it very clear that DGCA, ATC, and the operator have got no business to ask any questions if a pilot goes around in the interest of safety. But unfortunately, a study was carried out by the DGCA, and it was revealed that 87% people did not go around when situation demanded a go around. So why does it happen? Because no one asks any questions. If you have, so long as you're landed with an unstable approach safely, it's fine with them. So now this gets into their mind that we can get away with this unstabilized approach, and overconfidence, complacency, what will others think of me, all these things come into play. So people don't go. Now in this particular approach, it was totally unstabilized and he had no business to continue the approach. But still he continued. Now I was talking to some pilot during training, and these guys told me that in Qatar, if a pilot carries out a landing of the unstabilized approach, that is the last time he is flying in that Qatar airspace. So you can well imagine that kind of strict implementation. But here the implementation is so lax, nobody asks any questions, so long as you continue to land safely, whether stabilized or unstabilized. Secondly, 76% people were found not following SOPs, standard operating procedures. Now the standard operating procedures are made for promoting the safety, conducting safe and efficient operation. Can you imagine 76% people don't follow SOPs, and this become a norm rather than, So it is very sad state of affairs and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. And then our standards of ground training, particularly both I have been involved with this ground training. Now I can tell you that 95% and above pilots are only interested in earning a certificate so that they can meet these requirements of DGCA.
Yes.
They are not interested for any learning value or something. They just go through the motions, earn a certificate. Whoever can provide them a certificate, they are happy with it. And in this court of inquiry also, I mean this investigation also, it has been mentioned that training standards were found to be badly wanting. And still nothing is being has been done about it. An airline, such an old airline, Air India, oldest airline in our country, pride of our nation used to be. It does not have a system of proper ground training. And if ground training is just going through the motion and making certificates. So this kind of environments are totally unsuitable and not ideal for safe flying conditions.
You're absolutely right. In fact, Air Commodore, what you just said would have been my next question. Exactly that point. Captain Amit Singh, if you would like to come in on this as well very quickly. DGCA on paper has so many rules and regulations and requirements, so training requirements, skill upgradation requirement, exams every 6 months, training courses to be done every 1 year for you to be able to continue flying. So many of these systems in place. But is it, what Air Commodore Sivach is saying, is that the reality? It's just become a, kind of a farce where people just go attend it simply to mark attendance and get the certificate.
That has been put across very rightly, aptly. We do not do meaningful training.
Yeah.
We just go through the motions. So we check every box that we have done monsoon training, we have done ground school. Where is the learning? Learning is not there, and then checking is not there. The important part is the feedback to the system. So there is no training. If I am checking a person, I should know in the previous 6 months or 1 year what have been the deficiencies in training so that I can address the most important issues. But we have a standard syllabus. We will follow A to B or A to Z every time and tick the box and get away with it. So the standards and implementation of training in a meaningful manner is not there. Now, DGCA wants to come up with something called evidence-based training, which is the new concept or the buzzword in aviation. But that is a European concept, and that is being marketed by lobbies. India is not in a position to implement because the regulator of the Flight Standards Division is not in a position to correctly understand the concept and implement it. First, we have to be trained on the concept. But we have the concepts of Indian concepts, the Vedic concepts of learning, which even Airbus is coming back to. Airbus is coming to personalized training, understanding what is the real need of the trainee, and then devising a syllabus to meet the requirements. So we have something called Nidhi Dhyasan in the Vedic learning and personalized learning. That is personality development and training. You cannot have a person coming in a Ferrari driving at 100 kilometers, 150, and then switching roles to following SOPs. The inherent attitude or behavior of the person cannot be changed. It can only be controlled. So these concepts are not understood by the regulator. They're just implemented ad hoc. So ad hocism is prevalent everywhere. Just tick the box and get over with it. So every pilot who goes for a refresher wants to get over with the training, get a certificate, rightly said. But what is the learning? Every businessman will look for return of investment. The airline is investing money in simulator training, ground school. What is my return? Have you observed any change from the previous? Nothing is recorded. It is just past. So where is the return of investment or return of training? And tracking the training record. We spend millions in flight data recording and analyzing any exceedances. 100% monitoring has to be done by DGCA. But that is a reactive measure after an incident, accident happens. But during training, detailed recording of the training session is never done. Because the biggest lacuna in the system is a trainer.
Right.
A trainer is assigned or designated as an expert, subject matter expert overnight. The moment a normal pilot joins DGCA, he or she becomes an expert. So that cannot happen. But
You know,
even in nursery
Captain
schools,
Singh,
a
the one
teacher
point that
teaches
you
it for
raised, I
months.
think, is very important. When you said that businessmen will also look for return on investment and what is it that they're getting out of it. But unfortunately, sometimes they tend to take it to the point of safety as well, where it becomes dangerous. Safety can't be seen from the aspect of what return am I getting. It will perhaps be a once in 10 years accident that will grab the headlines. But it's the daily compromise on safety that actually brings us to that point. My apologies, Captain Minu Wadi, I'm completely out of time. But perhaps another day we'll have another conversation with all of you gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on this. You heard from our experts the way protocols and systems are ignored, the way the basics of training and skill upgradation, the way the basics of oversight are not implemented, makes it extremely unsafe the way our airlines are flying today. To the point where in 2014, the International Federation of Airlines actually downgraded India's ratings on safety for a year. We haven't come very far from there. To the point that now same kind of a crash has happened twice the last 2 decades. Shows we haven't come very far from that. And if you speak to any expert linked to the aviation, they will tell you the same thing. This chalta hai attitude. Because every day hundreds of flights are in air, taking to the skies and landing safely without any loss of life. So people tend to get complacent about it. More importantly, the aviation regulator tends to get complacent about it. The fact that there aren't enough experts of air safety, part of the DGCA implementing the system, is the other problem. It is high time our government wakes up and brings about a change. If nothing else, this report, the Kerala crash investigation report, shouldn't just be about putting the blame on one individual or 2 or 3. You say, oh, the Met officer was not there, oh, the pilot did not follow the systems, oh, the airline staff wasn't present. It's a systemic failure at every level, from the airport to the airline to the aviation regulator and the individuals. And the lesson to be learned here is that the systemic problems and the lapses have to be fixed, not just punishment to 1 or 2 people. Completely out of time. Thank you for joining us on this conversation.
पावर्ड बाय वेदांता, देश की जरूरतों के लिए।